Good evening and welcome indeed. So we're on week 8 and on the second one in the landscapes designed for public housing. And perhaps these are the most influential landscape memories are formed in these places by residents and especially children living here. So last week we learnt about Alexandra Road Park, designed in outline by Neve Brown and detailed and brought to life by Janet Jack. Very punchy design between them, and its rise and fall and the determination of a small group of residents to breathe new life into the place again. A range of fascinating speakers have accepted our invitations to focus in detail on each one of these post-war designed landscapes and gardens added to Historic England's register list, last year. And our objective with these talks is to raise awareness about the work and the ideas and thinking of the original designers, and also how these sites are now looking, to see what we can learn from this and take forward, excuse me, to find out more about where the relevant archives are and what makes these places still so very special. So this evening, we're delighted to welcome Colin Moore. He's a landscape architect and urban designer who's recently retired, having worked in the landscape industry for 50 years. He was an associate of John Kelsey Associates for 6 years, and then senior partner of Moore, Peart and Brooks for 20 years before becoming an independent landscape consultant. Early in his career, he worked for Michael Brown Partnership for a year and as the clerk of works for one project, and undertook site works for many other projects, including the Brunel Estate during the construction. Colin is well known to many landscape architects for his 35 years teaching and for the final professional exams and his expertise in construction and maintenance contracts and the CDM regulations. He is chair of the JCLI Contracts Forum and secretary also of FOLA. So over to you, Colin. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Michael Brown Partnership was actually the first landscape architecture practice that I worked for. Many years ago, 1973 to 4, and part-time for a couple, 2.5 years afterwards. Michael was actually the person that inspired me to be a landscape architect. Brunel Estate was one of the several projects that I worked on. I didn't go very often, but it was always to look at very specific things during the construction. And I found it one of the best of Michael's projects, as was Lancaster Road, which is still there, but in a very poor state, and also Field End, which has also been listed and is a subject of one of these talks in a few weeks' time. I hope this talk will tell you some of the story of the Brunel Estate, of the place and the people involved with it, from pre-development to now. But inevitably, I am only aware of a few pieces of that story and not many of the people. But I hope that the story can be filled out with more information, oral histories, and much, much more in the future. And also, of course, the story continues to evolve now and into the future, and should actually be documented. My experience as a landscape architect and urban designer has always been at the detailed design and construction end of projects, rather than the early planning and initial design stages. And it's that combined with the limitation on the information available, which actually influences the emphasis of my talk tonight. Finally, before I get stuck in, I must thank Camilla Beresford for her assistance with some of the research for this talk. Right, location, it's Westbourne Park Road, London, W2. Westbourne Park Underground Station is up here. If you can see the pointer, it's rather large for the purpose. And there's a pub next door, quite convenient. The northeast boundary of the site is significant linear zone of transport infrastructure, and the other two boundaries are roads, the Great Western Road and Westbourne Park Road. In terms of the site's history, until about 1795, the whole area was still fields, with a few houses around Westbourne Green, which is down this direction, and a track from Westbourne Green, which followed what is now Westbourne Park Road and Great Western Road and ended just to the north. The first intrusion through the fields was the Paddington arm of the Grand Junction Canal, which was opened in July 1801. And its name was changed to the Grand Union Canal in the 30s. And it runs just at the top of this plan through there. The London to Taplow part of the Great Western Railway line to Bristol was opened in 1838, at the same time as a very temporary Paddington station. The Taplow to Bristol part of the line opened in 1841. And the line, there was obviously only two lines at that time, and they're roughly through this alignment. If my hand would stop shaking, so would the cursor. Brunel's Paddington station opened in 1851, which was 16 years after the line opened. Now the triangle, which is the site, became a Great Western Railway mileage yard. As you can see, it's written in the middle. It's a type of goods yards. Originally, at a mileage yard, customers loaded wagons and paid per mile for their transport by the railway company. And presumably the same happened at the other end. They were unloaded by the customer or the recipient. At other goods yards, the railway company undertook the loading and unloading, and often collected and delivered. The Hammersmith to Paddington part of the Hammersmith and City line opened in 1864. And that runs along the boundary of the site and through Westbourne Park Station. The Paddington to Farringdon underground section, which is actually underground, whereas this section is overground. That first underground part had been done a year earlier. And the whole thing initially used steam trains, but was electrified in 1906. By the time Hammersmith and City line was built, housing surrounding the other sides of the site, this side and there, that had all been built, and up above as well. So the whole area developed in 70 years from about 1795 to 1865. The Westway, elevated dual carriageway, was constructed from 1962 to 70 prior to the estate, but interestingly isn't shown on any of the drawings of the estate. It passed up here, just above the train shed and down and across the railway lines and the road, following the underground line. It's an elevated dual carriageway and it overhangs railway land, and it also overhangs the canal. It was a controversial construction, especially to the west, but to the east it wasn't so controversial because it followed the railway lines and went through slums which were demolished. Charles Booth's London poverty map of 1889 shows the housing to the west of the site as predominantly middle class, well-to-do. And similarly on the southern side, except the mews areas at the back of the houses were designated as the very poor, casual, chronic want category. But by the 1960s, the housing to the south and southwest of the site was known as Rackman land, after Peter Rackman, who built a property empire of rundown mansion blocks and nightclubs in the 1950s, which included the housing to the south and the southwest of the site. He was notorious for exploiting and intimidating tenants, so much so that the term Rackmanism entered the Oxford English Dictionary. And if you're interested in his exploits, the Wikipedia entry is a good read. He was twice convicted of running brothel. He did a deal with the Cray twins to avoid them interfering with his empire. Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice Davis of the Perfumer Affair fame were his mistresses, and they lived in his flat as well. Or rather, one of the flats he owned. By the 1970s, Rackman lands had been derelict, and an area to the southwest of the site was compulsory purchase by City of Westminster for Wessex Green Estate, which is down here somewhere. You have to have a bit of scandal in history, don't you? The site is just over 8 acres, which is about 3.25 hectares. And it was purchased by City of Westminster from British Railways Board in November 1968 for £715,000. It's worth a bit more now. Westminster architects had started designs for the scheme, including the landscape areas, over a year before the site purchase was finalised, as evidenced by this drawing, the first version being dated October 67, and this is revision J of April 1968, when it was approved by the Westminster Housing Committee. The drawing number was then changed, and the entry in the revision column is Bill of Quantities, which means it was used for measurements for the contractor to tender a price to build the whole project. The drawing zones the landscape, including annotations for adventurous playground, 0.5 acres, future car park. Fortunately, the future car park never happened. A toddler's play area, 1 acre public open space, and associated with the public open space, a public footpath running all the way through the site and out at the top. A large central square, children's home and garden, which is this bit, and a site for day nursery, 0.3 acres, which was to be developed later and was developed later. The scheme was mostly funded by the Ministry of Housing, with different amounts related to different functions based on their size, like the 1 acre public open space was funded separately and at a different rate, of course. The proposal to accept the tender from Gilbert Ash Southern Limited for just over 2.2 million was agreed at the Westminster Council meeting on the 2nd of February 1970. And it must have been based on this architect scheme rather than Michael's scheme. This is Michael's plan. Michael's project list shows Brunel Estate as job number 27. 1970 to 74, although the design must have started before then because there are drawings at Merle of Michael's dated December 1969. And Michael was already working for Westminster on St Mary's Churchyard, which was job number 24. And that's the one that I was clerk of works on. And shortly after the Brunel Estate appointment, he was appointed for Mozart Street and Herries Street, which are both Westminster projects and both housing estates, job number 29. The plan is very similar to the Westminster Architects' plan in terms of distribution of facilities like adventurous play area being ball games and a play area, the toddlers play area, a central hard landscaped area, children's home garden, and a blank site for the day nursery, public footpath all the way through. So it's a very similar arrangement, but much more detail and much more complex. So far, we've not come across any of Michael's drawings for the project that are larger than A4 size. There are none at Merle or at the City of Westminster Archives Centre, but hopefully there's some somewhere, which we may find one day. However, Merle recently digitised the A4 size Brunel drawings that they have, and they include A4 reductions of 4 layout plans that were originally much larger, probably A1 size. But the areas of the play, the toddlers play area and the adventure play area, are not detailed on the plans, but there's a reference to other drawings which we don't have yet. The other A4 drawings are all details, some of which I'll show later. So this is one of the 4 plans. It's at the top end of the site, showing the ball games area, the play area for the larger children, which is in there but has no detail in it. This is the main road route into the site, which ends here, lots of car parking, and another road route here with parking, the footpath through the site. This space we'll look at in more detail in a bit. And this bit sits on the top, up here. We do look at a couple of areas in more detail, and you'll be able to see the detail that is actually in these plans. But this is a A4 reduction from much larger drawing, A1 probably. And it is, I think it'll be on tracing paper or film rather than print. And this is obviously a scan. This is part of that area. It's actually in there. This is a low wall and this is a high wall, which you can see the low wall round here and the higher wall comes through there. So timber play structure. Apologies for the colour of this slide. It is a slide that I took in 1974, and they have all lost their yellow colour, so they've all gone purple, which is why some of my pictures on black and white scans rather than colour scans. Michael did these on quite a few projects. It's not surprising that none of them survive. They will have burnt down or possibly rotted or whatever, but they are very, very complex. This isn't the most complex of the ones that he did. The one at St Mary's Churchyard was much more complex than this, but ladders up and lots of circulation, different routes and everything. And this is sort of amphitheatre seats for this area. That's 1974, and this is 2017. You can still see the low wall, the higher wall in a Z shape with a railing added on the top, and the amphitheatre seats. In the foreground, we have the slide just popping in the corner. This knee rail on the right-hand side is original. This railing, I'm not sure whether it's original or not, because the original didn't have the centre bar. So either the centre bar has been welded on or it's a new railing. The railing at the back looks original, but all the play equipment and surfacing is all new, and as is all the bow top fencing all over the area around the slide. And the slide goes right down into the bottom and into this low area down here, and then up on the steps. That is a slide that has been listed. 1974. Photo from Merle, so it's one of Michael's photos. And this one, 2017. You can see the differences quite clearly. Main ones being all the additional fencing rather than Michael's very sparse open rail. And all of the aids to climbing the brickwork have been removed, like the foothold, the little post hold, and the step irons that go up the slope. Another handhold, and of course you can hold this if you come in this direction. Another foothold, handhold, big steps to climb up. They've all gone, and you can actually see here, you can see the 3 pieces of brick that have filled in where the hole was for the feet. And in the early days, children were all over it. They are most probably children that have been liberated from slums, because the whole area was pretty much slums and very dense. So all of the open space and the play areas were completely novel to them. They'd probably only been playing on bomb sites and unused mileage yards, etc. So children all over it. And here you can see the step iron to climb up. So you can come up this way as well as go up that way. And then handhold posts. And here is quite amazing slope, which curls round and twists. It's flat across here and twists back the other direction on the other side of the slide, which you can see up here. And how it connects together, and the railings at the top and the steps. We will see a detail of that in a minute. And at the bottom, this is 2017, token rubberized surface. And it looks like this is a new grating where there was probably an old grating. Otherwise, there will have been a lot more damage to the brickwork. And there is a gully down at ground level. So that is for if it floods. But the making good around the edge is a bit botched with mortar everywhere. So doesn't match the quality of the other restoration work that's been done. This railing here is the one we looked at before, which has had the either middle rail added or is a new railing now. And the details. This is a pencil drawing on a piece of tracing paper, the original, scanned. It's probably faded so much because it is pencil and has been rubbing against other drawings that are also pencil. So the pencil has rubbed off a bit, but it's a plan at the top of the slide. That's the entrance to the slide going down there. Brick slopes up either side of it. And this is a brick ramp up to the slide. There's a brick slope up here, steps here cutting into the slope as they do, because the slope is leaning away from the steps, and the angles where the direction of the slope of the paving changes. And the next one, there's a section line here across the face of there, and that is that section. So ground level in red, the rails on either side, and the slide in the middle. The construction underneath the ground, concrete. And this is an elevation looking from this side in that direction. So the railing and the top edge of the slide, the sliding surface is there. The dotted lines are things which you can't actually see when you look at the elevation, which are hidden behind things. So all of this is hidden under the ground. The railing isn't hidden because it projects. I know these are the original details because of the yellow on the title block and the red denoting where the section cuts into the ground. I'm stumped for words to say about this picture. I suggest anybody that has a good idea for a caption should put it into the chat box. But please keep it clean. But I don't know, it stumps me, that picture. I obviously took it for a reason. This is at the very top corner of the site. It's the public footpath running through the site, and it illustrates perfectly Michael's brick detailing, where the sinuous paths, the long joints of the brick paving following the curves of the footpath, and brick slopes on either side, or as he used to call it, brick on slope. I've always shortened it to brick slopes, which protect the grass, and they actually enable the amount of fill in the grass areas to be increased because of the steepness of the sides, and they prevent a bit of shortcutting, although children will obviously cut across those. This is one of Michael's photos, which is at Merle. These photos are by Gwyn Gilmore, who is a resident of the estate, an active resident, active in improving the quality of the landscape improvements. And hopefully he will contribute later on when we get to question time. I've rotated this plan so that it's the same orientation of the picture above it. The picture obviously shows a wee bit of deterioration. There are only 2 trees left, whereas this one has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The paving is falling to pieces in places, partly because of the tree damage, but there's other places where bricks have come out, infill with red, inappropriate red bricks. These will be the original benches. One missing. I think there was one. No, there isn't. So there isn't one missing. So those 2 benches, Z shape and the long one, still there. And if you look at the plan, you can see detail references are in circles. So 6/3. The first reference relates to the type of detail. 6 is benches. 6/3 are these Z-shaped benches or the straight benches. 6/1 are seats with backs, which there aren't any here. And 1 was paving, 2 was edges, 3 was slopes. So there's a whole range of those numbers. 11 was the play area details, which we just seen. They were in the series of 11. And you can see all setting out, still in feet and inches those days, radii. So it's all there. Contours on the soft landscape. These are the wall boundary to the ball games area. So fully detailed, these dots are gully points. And there are levels all over it as well. So by 2012, the brick had been redone with a matching brick. Another tree gone. Brick box with planting in it and 2 new seats. And that is the planter in 2019. The second plan is the centre of the site. So this is the public footpath through the site. There's all sorts of other footpath links all running through. And this one through here, up there, although the main route comes in this direction. The toddlers play area, central space, which the residents now call the Sunken Garden, and the children's home garden. This is one of Michael's drawings from pictures taken from the building on the left of the previous plan, looking down to the toddlers play area. And this was a 1 o'clock club, still got chestnut pale fencing around it. And obviously the grass recently laid because it's still hose pipe for watering, and lots of children everywhere. This is taken down from a building, looking at the space between buildings and out to the toddlers play area. And this shows many of Michael's standard details. This sort of bench, L shape or straight or Z shape, appears on many, many projects. And it's very common for square areas of paving which all drain to the centre, gradually reducing squares of paving and mitered joints, whereas the bricks around the trees again are gradually reducing. Gradually reducing squares, laid on sand and jointed with gravel. So that it's all loose, obviously topsoil underneath so the trees grow. Many of the trees, well, all the trees are root balled. Many of the smaller size ones are with angle stakes. The larger ones are underground guide, like this one and this one. Lamp columns and railings all painted black, brick slopes round everywhere. There's a 3 brick wide gutter all the way down the edge of the slide, collecting the water. Steps, and again with the step irons and holes for feet, etc. Steps up, and circular sort of set of steps at the back with lines going up the brick slope. We'll be talking about those later. And this one is taken from the building to the right of this picture. So if this lamp column is number 1 and that one is number 2, that is number 1 and that is number 2 on this photograph. and that's showing over to the central area. And the shadows are quite long on these. So this is a shadow of this bench. And later on, I will talk about these two trees and this bench. Just so this is just to locate them. This is taken further along from that building of the central area. Again, these are all 1974, and this is the shadow of the tower block, which actually shades the area so you can't see much. But this is the Z sort of, or S-shaped footpath going through the building. And this one comes along and goes down a ramp and then up some steps and zigzags through the building again. So this is a central area plan, which is Michael's, again with all details all over it, steps 3/4 and 5, and brick slopes 3/1. I just mentioned the route that goes through there, down the ramp, up the steps and zigzags through the building. The other route is through at higher level and through there or down there, back there. This is the lowest level and then an intermediate level here. And it's all brick. And interestingly, in the Westminster Archive, there is a set of drainage plans which relate exactly to Michael's drawings. One of the odd things about them is that they're definitely Westminster drawings, but their number sequence is Michael's numbering. So they're the same job number as Michael's, and they're series 7 in terms of details, and 7 was drainage. You've got here 7/8. 27 is the job number, and that's been written on to refer to something. I'm not sure what. And there's two things to notice on the drainage drawing. One is that every tree pit in the hard landscape has a drain. Every single tree pit drains to a manhole and off to the drainage system. Every one. And these are the gullies in the landscape, which are also drained. One of the things to note about Michael's drawings is they cover the whole of the external works. They even cover all the roads, all the levels of the roads are on Michael's drawings, the layout, the dimensions, setting out, everything is on Michael's drawings. Whether he designed it all or not isn't clear, but it's quite possible. And certainly all the gullies are on here, and all the falls to the gullies, they're all there. All the setting out, all the dimensions, all the details. And these seats are 6/1, which is a seat with a back, and 6/3 is a standard bench, either L-shape, Z-shape, L-shape, straight. And they're all 6/3s, whereas these 3 are all 6/1s with backs. The other thing about the drainage is that all the manholes align with the paving joints. They don't align with the outlet pipe, which is the normal thing for engineers to do. And it still is, unfortunately. As it is in 2017, taken from about here, looking in that direction. So steps on the right and then another set of steps going up to the footpath, which is running through there. Railing, which is dashed. Looking up at all the vegetation in the large open space. Part of the reason for the central areas all the grass areas being raised is to use fill material excavated from the site from foundations for buildings, etc., and roads. So it's all stacked up in these areas. And it's one of the advantages of using the brick slope, that you can actually get much more fill in than if this was just a grass slope. And the brick slope also reinforces the edge to stop erosion and wear from children climbing up it, which obviously happens. There's very little that has changed in this photo other than the trees have grown, of course. The lamp columns have changed colour and the fitting on the top is different. The black has gone off the galvanised railings. The box around where a tree was is new. And the seat is, there was a seat there, but it was a bench. And this is completely new. This is a photo from up here on the grass, looking down towards the S-shaped footpath across the sunken area. Again, a lot of it is the same. The 3 trees in the sunken area are still there. There were 3 trees here and at least one of them is left. These 2 benches are both new. That Z shape is still the same. I suspect the slats have been replaced. There was an L shape here. So that's either a complete replacement or part of the leg. The legs are part of the old bench, possibly. The boxes around the trees are new. They were done in 2014. I'm not sure it's an appropriate solution. Obviously, the trees were pushing up all the paving around them. But I'm not sure a box is appropriate, because if it has adequate foundations, it will have damaged the tree roots. If it has inadequate foundations, then the tree's just going to push it over anyway. So I'm not sure it's a long-term solution in either event. And of course, the pergola and trellis is new. This is the intermediate area, probably the area that has changed most. There were 6 trees and now there's just 1. This is 2017. This is obviously a new planted tree. And there are bushes in each centre of each of the others. I think this is a rogue. Otherwise, the layout's about the same. And I suspect that the metalwork on these is the same and just slats have been replaced, because these 2 were seats with backs originally. Yeah. My apologies, I've jumped right to the end. These are some of Gwyn's photos again. 2006. One of the trouble with my photos and the ones of Merle is that there is an enormous gap between 74 and 2017 with no pictures. So Gwyn's do fill in a little of what happened in between. Like in 2006, this bench had already been replaced. New slats probably on all of these. That still looks like it's an L shape, brightly painted. Red brick infill on the slope. Some of the bricks around the trees still left in the same sort of pattern that Michael did. The rest is very similar. Then in 2010, at least the colour's gone off the benches, but new planting boxes. Some bulbs around the trees, quite pleasant, springtime. these looked the same sort of design as Michael's, just new slats, whereas this is completely new. But in 2012, the upper area was looking extremely sad. Concrete infill in 3 of the tree pits, the 1 tree still left, a flowering magnolia, struggling. But completely changed by 2014. Boxes around the 3 with planting in them, central plant in each. The magnolia is still there. But this is 2014, and this one is 2017. So apart from the rogue plant in here, these don't seem to have grown very much since 2014. I'm not quite sure why. So this is the toddlers' play area. You've already seen the pit on the right, but this includes all the rest. Ramps and steps and everything else. So the ramps down, these paving slabs actually had a barred surface on, so they were non-slip. But again, it's the same sort of details completely. This is the top of the slide in the toddlers' play area. Minimal fencing again, no fencing around the outside of play areas at all. Just to give an idea of time, this young lady will be in her 50s now. But this picture illustrates the no fencing around the outside. All the step up details again to climb to the top, and that circular pair of steps with the lines up the slope around here at the back. And that's the set of steps that are sort of circular with that create the lines up the slope. Go around. This was one of the things I was sent to site to do. In fact, it was the first time I visited the site. I had to go and help the bricklayers set out the brickwork around the toddlers' play area. Fortunately, they'd done 90% of it by the time I got there. But I helped with the setting out either side of the slide and checked all the rest. This was one of the pictures that I took back to the office to discuss with them, because although the steps look extremely good, really well done, they weren't quite correct, because this should have been a constant sort of curve around there rather than stepping out at every junction. And the end of each step, the nosing should have been different according to the detail, and it wasn't. But they did do a nightly mitre so that you didn't get small little bits of brick that would fall out. And note these are brick on end, whereas this is brick on edge, and that's brick on end. And this is a tree square, just to show the gravel in the joints and that they were open rather than these which are mortared in. On some sites where there was a problem with the children pulling up the bricks, what was always called vandalism, and in fact only children playing, these short joints were mortared and the long joints were left gravel. This is the plan, again an A4 detail. So this is a slope down on the left of the picture, across the step and down the bottom slope. And the curve around it's all on a radius and drawn so that it can all be easily set out. And you can see at the bottom it is a smooth set of angled lines rather than each one stepping out as it was built. And you can see the detail of the brick on end, but the brick on end continues for a couple of bricks on the step before you get the brick on edge nosing of the step. And this has got a section A, section B and a detail C on it, which are on the next detail. So this is section A, typical section through the slopes with concrete underneath and mortar bed. And this is the elevation beyond the section with each step rising up and the steps in the slope with the fainter lines. And the section up that way going up the steps, again, is fairly standard. The only difference is that the length of each tread is different, and that's because it's on a curve. And also steps are wider on the left than on the right. But you can see that the brick on end at the end of each of these steps. This one's drawn better than the bottom one. It's freehand drawn. You see brick on end and it stops the recessed joint underneath. But it does create a very small piece there unless you mitre, and the brick is mitred. And didn't use the brick on end, they carried through the brick on edge. You see the 3.4, which is the detail reference again. I'm not quite sure what the 0384 is, but it appears on all details. Similar numbers. I'm not sure what they refer to. And some of Gwyn's photos again. So back in 2006, it looks like all the brickwork and the slide was still there. Certainly the whole area, the sunken area is still there. The ramps, steps, slopes, all seems to be still there. More equipment added and the brickwork fall into bits in places. But by 2010, the whole area had been filled up to the top of this wall, which is the level of the footpath around the side. But the brickwork at the edge is left, which is up here. This brickwork at the top. These two photos are taken from a similar position. These three hoop tops are three of the hoop tops here. So it's looking across at that building. This one is. All new equipment. And in 2017, the same equipment is there. These pieces of equipment are these two. This one's this one. And you can see the brick slope around the play area is still there. And there are lines up the slope at the back still. And the slide, which would have started around here, the slope has obviously been made good and it's done extremely well using matching bricks or some spare bricks that were on site. So it looks a really good job. These are the lines up the slope that are on the left-hand side of the old photograph that you saw of these set of steps. The steps have gone, but you can see there's a line through there where this bit looks different than above. And this part is all the bit that has been reinstated. And I suspect the colour isn't because of the bricks, but because of mortar joints being newer, probably. I haven't looked at it closely. And you'll also note that these steps get bigger and bigger to a certain point, and then they start getting smaller and smaller. That is in the bit that has been rebuilt. It reduces, but it's an extremely good job. It's probably only people like me that notice. But of course, it is now all fenced all the way around, and that fencing has been there for a very long time from other photos that are on the internet, or at Westminster. Westminster has some photos of 1999, where there is some equipment being added in there, but the whole of the rest is the same, except for more railings around the top of the slide and around the whole area.
Colin,
yes,
can I ask you to wind up in about 3 minutes,
Ooh,
please?
in about 3 minutes.
Yeah, I know, it's tough, isn't it?
You'll be lucky. You'll be lucky.
It'd be good to get a debate going.
I could go on for hours. I'm skipping a lot already. Anyway, part of my job going to these sites was to take photos. I had 2 cameras, one with slide film and one with ordinary print film to develop and take into the office to discuss, and slide film for my own purposes. These are all slides that I took. They are at Merle in the Morpiet and Brooks archive, which I donated a lot later. These are just photos of details, just to show how they work. Extremely interesting. These are 2 of problems. This one isn't necessarily a problem, but I thought the steps sticking out of the slope was a bad detail, compared with slopes sitting in the slope, recessed back into the slope, which most of Michael's steps all were. This is the only time I saw them projecting from the slope. And the problem with these is also that they get narrower. So there's a step across every time, because these get narrower from both ends, because the cut slope projects into the steps on that side, and they're cut. So if you follow the joint down from there, it comes out here somewhere. So if you actually walk down the steps, you'll fall down if you're on this edge. This one, I pointed out 2 trees and a bench between them. There are 2 problems. Both ends of the bench, the support is into the tree pit, which means the amount of topsoil in the tree pit is significantly reduced, because there's a mass of concrete sat on compacted ground underneath. The other leg this is a shadow, so it's here. And the other problem is, when the trees grow, the trunks expand, and it won't be long before they're into the end of the bench, at both ends. A very poor detail. That's the 3rd drawing. There's very little on it, but you will see that Michael did all the levels all over the roads, all the parking areas, all that is all Michael's detailing. Drainage, the lot for the roads. And the engineers near it. And this is up this boundary, roadside. And of course, the road rises to go over the bridge, over the railway. Hence the elevation going up. I realise I haven't talked very much about the vegetation, and that's mainly because there are no planting plans anywhere that we've been able to find. But also, it is very evident in all the photos. These 2, this one is the main footpath through from the southern end down here, and this one is through the buildings here, where the S-shaped footpath runs into the central sunken area. This is a list of species from Michael's article in Landscape Design. It isn't acacia, it will be false acacia, i.e. robinia, because I never saw acacia on any of his projects, but robinia was everywhere. Now we're into words. There's a big gap between 1974 and the present. This is a summary of what I've discovered. It was obviously originally managed by Westminster. It was transferred to City West Homes, one of those arm's length management organisations, in 2002. 2007, there was a planning application for disabled access ramp to the ball games area. 2011, tenants vote halts Brunel Estate regeneration proposals. It's a headline in the local paper. 58% voted against, and the regeneration plan was abandoned, fortunately. 2018, September, WCC decided to terminate City West Homes, which is post-Grenfell, so that is probably part of the reason why. In 2020, of course, the landscape was listed grade 2 on the Parks and Gardens register, and the slide is a grade 2 listed building. Karen visited site and did an article for the Daily Telegraph, and this is a couple of quotes. So, mother and daughter have especially valued access to the gardens and the toddlers' playground during lockdown. Raphael grew up on the estate, says how he loved playing on the slide and is happy that his 8-year-old daughter Harley now enjoys it too when they visit his mother. So presumably his mother still lives on the estate. And the Westminster City Council press release, again September 2020, at the time of listing. Sounding board had a few things to say. Pleased that the slide to our estate has been listed as it's unique. Landscaping of the grounds is special because large green oasis among residential buildings. We're happy that the landscape designer has given us so many trees, so many green areas and spaces for children, has had his work recognised.
Colin.
Yes? Why so special? 2 reasons why so special. Because Michael Brown Partnership produced the best UK housing landscape designs of the 1960s and 1970s. Brunel Estate is probably, well, it is, as far as I know, the best remaining landscape of council housing designed and implemented by Michael Brown. And there's the man himself in Philadelphia in 55 to 7 and in the 80s. Credits, got to have credits. This is the last slide, credits. So Gilbert Ash built everything, civic trees, Knowles and Weller, the grass and planting. They don't exist anymore, I don't think. And the hard and soft landscape cost was approximately £160,000. Be good if it was today. So that's the last one.
Thank you so much, Colin. I'm really sorry to have to rush you a little bit at the end, but you've got a really good debate going in the chat, and I'm in 7th heaven looking at that brick construction, but I think it would be really good if we can let 1 or 2 people air their thoughts and their questions. Gwyn, are you still with us? And if you are you willing to
Yes,
unmute?
Yes,
Would
I'm
you-
unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Have you got a few comments or any views you'd like to express?
Well, I had views before, and now that listening to Colin's greater descriptions of things, I'm kind of stumped, really. I want to say, first and foremost, I and about another 6 residents were the leaders to stop the refurbishment of the estate. And I quickly add that if the suggestions put forward by the architects and landscape architects and so on had been for social housing, we would have a great difficulty opposing that. As it was, of course, it was for sale and shared ownership and supposedly affordable. So I just want to say that right away, that, you know, I'm glad we stopped it for many different reasons. I'm going to jump back to the trees. Clearly, and we can see, because Michael Brown had squares everywhere, the brick squares in paving and around the estate where saplings had been planted. Clearly they died and were never replanted. We still have well over 80 trees on the estate. I tried to count them on the arboriculturist drawings recently. We've still got at least 80 trees. And for the last 10 years, Westminster, when they've had to fell trees, and particularly the Robinia, they don't seem to last so long, they plant a new one. So last year we had 10 new trees planted. So the number of trees will continue to be high for the area. I'm then going to say it wasn't until 2005, 2006 that we residents became involved in the upkeep of the estate. And it is a constant battle to get the building contractors to put in the proper bricks and not to cover the bricks in the cement instead of in between the bricks. So where they did that so badly over the years, we've had it repaired. And every time we do one, we have to get them back to redo it, to do them properly. So we residents have been the guardians, if I can say, and I'm not exaggerating. I'll then quickly go to what we call the Sunken Garden. Colin pointed out the multicolored benches. That was the then estate manager who thought it would be fun for children to paint all the slats, all these different colors, which personally speaking, I thought were horrible. We move on a few years, and again, I and a few residents were offered about 14,000 from a local charity, a local publicly funded actually, probably funded by Westminster, to spend money on the estate. So we got them to completely redo the benches in the Sunken Garden, new slats, simply varnished, and it's the only place we were able to get one of Michael Brown's zigzag benches, as I call them, replaced. Everywhere else, Westminster have refused to do that, and we end up with some horrible benches dotted around different areas or seating. I think that's kind of a rundown of what I'm saying. I mean, finally, when Westminster did agree in about 2009 that the roads needed resurface, and at the same time the main footpath through and that runs round the side of the sports pitch as it now is would be completely redone, and the contractor tendered for like bricks and recycling those that could be saved from the original brickwork. In the event, the contractor turned up with red concrete bricks, and one of the residents and I practically stood in front of them with the bulldozer, refusing to allow it. And so the then new project manager from City West, as it was then, refused to allow them as well. And he sourced recycled bricks, and from outside, not the ones from the estate. So he recycled thousands of recycled bricks and reclaimed, not recycled, reclaimed bricks, and new ones that could be interspersed. So we ended up with as near as we could possibly get. That was a battle. The project manager had to go back to Westminster 3 times, because every time we walked around the estate with him and said, this needs done, that needs done, da-da-da, and he priced it and went back to Westminster Cabinet Finance Office or Committee. They refused. So he had to keep going back, reducing the scheme to get it to a point where Westminster was happy with the cost. So that's kind of a very quick rundown. But absolutely, we residents appreciate and value what we've been left. Absolutely. That's all.
Thank you so much for that. That adds such an important perspective on the life of the estate, and thank you also for standing your ground on the quality of design. I'm also very interested about your comment about things might have been different if social housing had been
yes, truly,
that's,
none of us would have,
very-
with the heart, would have voted against that.
very
But that
kind.
wasn't the plan, so we had no difficulty, and it would have ruined everything that the estate was. in.
Well, really appreciate that input, and thank you so much.
Okay.
We're running out of time, but I wondered if we could just perhaps ask Ed, Bennis, Helen Brown, and perhaps Camilla, if you're still with us, just to ask your questions or illuminate and elaborate on your comments about play, safety, fear, risk, etc. And thank you, Helen, for explaining about Esther Ranson. Makes me feel so old. Ed, have you got anything you'd like to say around your comments? Are you still here? Get the feeling we might have lost Ed. Helen, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, if you've got any comments you'd like to add.
Well, it's just that it's like crime, isn't it? The perception of crime and the perception of safety. It's the way that people think about things, and also encouraging children to be adventurous and play outside. You know, the demographic and the statistics show that children are really not playing outside, and so if you've got this culture of over protection, and it creates real problems for funding. The costs of play areas are absolutely monumental, and there's nothing wrong with spending lots of money, but it's just that it's the technical aspects of safety that's now legislated for makes it a very difficult area for providing really wide-ranging types of experiences for children. And I'm afraid Esther Ranson gets, you know, the crown for being the person that would, it just banged on about it right through all the 70s and 80s, and then I came into looking at the play areas mid to late 80s, and it was just a nightmare of attrition. Thank you, that's it.
Thanks, Helen, I really appreciate that. And I'm really sorry to the other people who took the time and trouble to put in their comments that we can't go through them in any more detail, as we really are out of time now. But I wonder, Annabelle, could you, I was going to say unmask, but I think I mean unmute, and perhaps thank Colin and Gwyn for fantastic evening.
Absolutely. No, it was really brilliant detail, Colin. I think you've done us proud. I think what I would like is to sort out a walk and a tour with you, Colin, and with Gwyn as well, if he can give us his time to do that. I think that would be fantastic. Really brilliant, Colin. You've brought the place to life. Shown us under a magnifying glass all the details and everything, and I think and Gwyn's brought you know, what it's like living there as a resident, which is really just critical to the whole thing. So fantastic. I have to put in a slight apology. As I collected Michael Brown's drawings, there were 2 garages full of his work, and I couldn't take everything, and I'm really sorry. It was so hard to select.